The fire snapped and hissed inside the small log cabin, throwing long, restless shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Elias sat close to it, his hands stretched toward the heat, his face lined by years of cold winters and quieter grief. Christmas Eve had come again, though out here it felt like any other night, except heavier. The mountains were buried beneath deep snow, the sky sealed shut with thick clouds, and the world beyond his cabin seemed erased. He had once shared this night with laughter, with a woman humming softly while bread baked, and a child slept nearby. Now there was only the crackle of burning wood and the slow ache of memory. He rose to add another log to the fire, boots scraping against the floor when the wind shifted. Beneath its howl came a sound that didn't belong, a faint thud, then another. Elias froze, listening harder. A knock, weak, desperate. His heart began to pound as he reached for his rifle, instinct born from years of living alone in unforgiving land. No traveler chose this pass in winter. Anyone out there now was either foolish or dying. He pulled the door open just enough to look out, and the storm clawed its way inside. A figure stood on the threshold, swaying, barely upright. A woman. Snow clung to her dark hair and lashes, her buckskin clothing torn and stiff with ice. Her eyes met his for a brief moment, filled not with threat but with raw fear. "I can't feel my feet," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please." Her knees gave way before Elias could answer. He dropped the rifle and caught her just in time, startled by how light she felt in his arms. She was shaking violently, her skin burning with fever, even through the cold-soaked clothes. Elias shut the door, bolted it, and carried her to the hearth, laying her close to the fire as gently as he knew how. As he worked to warm her, rubbing life back into her hands, he noticed the careful beadwork stitched into her clothing, symbols he half recognized, from the tribes that once moved freely through these mountains. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, wary even in weakness, watching him as if measuring whether this shelter came with danger. Outside, the wind screamed louder, battering the cabin as if trying to tear it apart. Inside, Elias fed the fire until the room glowed bright and warm. For the first time in many winters, the silence was broken not by memories, but by another human breath. And on a night he had long believed cursed with loneliness, fate had quietly knocked on his door. Morning light crept into the cabin in thin, pale lines, reflecting off the snow piled high outside the windows. Elias woke with a start, disoriented by the unfamiliar sound of movement. For a moment he thought he had dreamed the night before, that the knock, the storm, and the woman by the fire were all tricks of loneliness. Then he saw her. She stood near the hearth, steadying herself with one hand on the mantel, the other stirring a small pot suspended over the flames. The sharp scent of crushed herbs filled the air, cutting through the smell of smoke and damp wood. "You should be resting," Elias said, his voice rough from disuse. She turned slowly, her dark eyes alert but calm. "The fever has gone," she replied. "Your fire is strong." It helped. He nodded, unsure how to respond. She moved carefully, favoring one foot. But there was quiet strength in the way she carried herself. Up close, Elias noticed the fine lines of exhaustion on her face, the faint scar along her cheek, and the intricate patterns stitched into her buckskin dress. Everything about her spoke of survival. "My name is Ayana," she said after a pause. "I owe you my life." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "Did what anyone would," he muttered, though he knew it wasn't true. Out here, many would have turned a stranger away. Fewer still would have trusted a native woman after years of bloodshed and fear, yet none of that seemed to matter now. As the hours passed, an uneasy rhythm formed between them. Elias mended a broken snowshoe at the table, while Ayana repaired a tear in her cloak, her fingers quick and sure. They spoke little, but the silence was no longer hollow. It wrapped around them gently, like the blanket Elias had placed over her shoulders the night before. When the sun dipped low again, Elias surprised himself by setting 2 plates on the table. Diana noticed but said nothing, only offering a small smile that warmed him more than the fire. As darkness fell, she began to speak, her voice soft, telling stories of winter journeys, of spirits that walked the snow, and of stars that watched over the living. Elias listened, drawn in despite himself. He found his own story spilling out in return, the wife lost to sickness, the child buried before he learned to speak. The words came heavy, raw, but Ayana did not turn away. She listened as if grief were something sacred. Later, as the fire burned low, Ayana sang a quiet song meant to chase away sorrow. Elias slept that night with a calm he had forgotten. The loneliness loosened, if only for a while. The storm loosened its grip by the third morning, leaving the world outside the cabin washed clean and painfully bright. Sunlight glimmered across untouched snow, turning the mountains into something almost holy. Elias stood by the window longer than usual, knowing without being told that this was the day she would leave. The cabin, which had felt alive for the first time in years, already seemed to sense the coming quiet. Ayana packed her few belongings with calm efficiency. She moved more easily now, her strength returned, though the faint weariness in her eyes remained. When she shouldered her pack, Elias felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. He had shared only 2 days with her, yet the space she filled was far larger than time could measure. "My people will be searching," she said gently. "They will think the mountain took me." Elias nodded. Words felt clumsy. Instead, he handed her a small bundle of dried meat and bread, then paused before offering his thickest wool blanket. It had been his wife's once. Ayana hesitated, understanding the weight of the gesture, then accepted it with a solemn nod. "You give more than warmth," she said. They stepped outside together. The air was sharp and clean, the silence broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their boots. At the edge of the trees, Ayana stopped. She reached into a pouch at her waist and pressed a small carved talisman into Elias's palm, worn smooth by time and touch. "For when the nights grow long," she said, "it reminds the heart to stay open." Elias closed his fingers around it, unable to speak. Ayana met his eyes one last time, a soft smile passing between them, then turned and disappeared into the forest, her figure blending with the white and shadow until she was gone. Elias remained there long after, the cold seeping into his bones. Yet something inside him burned steady and warm. When he finally returned to the cabin, it no longer felt like a place of waiting. The fire seemed brighter, the walls less heavy with memory. That night, Elias stepped outside again and looked up at the stars. They seemed closer somehow, less distant. He thought of the song Ayana had sung, of stories carried across generations, of paths crossing when least expected. For years, winter had taken everything from him: love, laughter, purpose. But this winter, quietly and without warning, had given something back. And for the first time since his loss, Elias believed that Christmas might someday mean more than survival again.